Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Therapy by the Book. My name is William Haddad.
I'm Daniel Villanueva.
And this is the show where we take your favorite fictional characters and ask the question, what would it be like if they came to therapy? So, last time was the MCU. This time we are in the DC universe.
I know. We kind of had a little bit of a... We touched on that last time we talked. It's just the idea that I feel like the criminals are a little bit better. I feel like there's some darkness that really resides on this side of the comic book universe. So I'm drawn to it. I'm curious. I didn't want to say that I feel like there's more depth on this side, but sometimes I do. Sometimes I do. I could be completely wrong. I'm not an expert in comic books or anything else, but the little bit that I have read, this is just where I've gravitated.
I mean, we touched on this last time too, I think, but as not a comic book expert either, but as far as I've been able to observe in my own experience, certainly in the case of our referral today with Batman, the villains of Batman lore tend to be some of the most interesting and complex and highly nuanced villains out there. And for the most part, at least in terms of the MCU films, the Marvel Cinematic Universe versus the not the the DCU so much, because those movies are really kind of garbage, but other other adaptations of DC characters and stories, the villains have always delivered, and I'm really excited to talk about that because as many fans of Batman out there will likely agree with, part of what makes Batman such a compelling hero is not just his own story, but the stories and dynamics of the villains that he comes up against as a crime fighter.
And we're going to concentrate on the Christopher Nolan, the trilogy, right? The Dark Knight trilogy.
Correct.
That's where I sat, because I mean, there's, I grew up with like Adam West and everybody else, so I've seen him change just like I've seen Superman change. It's been fun sometimes, and then other times, not so much.
There's many different. I'm glad you mentioned that, because there's many different interpretations on this character, both in film as well as in comics, and not just his personality, but his backstory, his motives for becoming Batman, or the Batman in some instances.
There you go.
Even the labeling shifts depending on which universe we're in. So for this episode, we're going to be looking at the Dark Knight Batman in Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight trilogy, all three films, and the interconnected story and psychological aspects of each one.
And I love in this trilogy that we got to see how he became who he is, all the training and everything else. So, well, let me reword that. We got to see, or we got to speak to him, so he could tell us how he became who he became, and how he knows and is able to do the things that he does. This version of him is so powerful, and his the foes that he has fought. It's amazing to hear his stories about him.
We finally got my wish, getting 3 movies or intakes rather. I got an entire one devoted to his backstory, which I'm always saying, I want more. I want to hear more about where'd you come from and why'd you do this?
We always do. We always do. There's oh my gosh, I wish I could give her some props right now. I can't remember her name. I met her once. But she's actually somebody that created a very popular form of psychotherapy. She's from Florida, and she says that we're all ghouls. And at first when she said that, I thought, well, that's a rude thing to say. But as we started to go into the process of her training, and just the things she said, I realized, man, in a weird way, she's right. Not literally, but we want to hear all the darkness. We want to see the pain and the, well, what I would call the suffering, because from that we find the light, we find the other side, and that's the missing piece. That's the piece that she didn't say. She alluded to it, and we got there eventually. But at the beginning, that was the statement that, for shock value, I'm assuming that we're all ghouls. So we were able to be ghouls here.
So when you say ghouls, or when she said ghouls, this other psychotherapist, what specifically did that mean? Like, there's
Well, she didn't really elaborate. I feel like sometimes we do, and I do the same thing in sessions. Sometimes I'll say things for shock value. I need to get a reaction out of you. Matter of fact, today in session, like somebody got mad at me, but it wasn't them. It was the little boy in them that got mad at me, and I pushed in order for them to actually stand up for themselves and actually get this energy out. I don't care if it's pointed at me, because the outcome is going to be positive. I'm not going into it in any negative way. I'm not trying to hurt them or them. I'm just showing up for them, but I need to push them. I need the shock value, and it turned out exactly like I expected. There was a lot of emotion, but then there was a huge release. And for her, when she started the training, oh man, I wish I could remember what the name of the training. It's super famous. As soon as if I see it somewhere, I'll say that one. You'll say, oh my god, she invented that. But yeah, and she used to hang out with she got trained with not Viktor Frankl, Fritz Perl. Like he personally trained her in Gestalt, and like she's old school. She's been around for a long time. Anyway, when the statement was made of the ghoul, it was to get our attention, right? To get us to perk up and challenge her. To say we're not ghouls. We're trying to help people. We're trying to be here for them. And as the training evolved, and as we started to get into what needed to be done in order to get the results that we're looking for, I realized what she was really trying to say. And that's exactly what you're talking about now, is this idea that we want to know all the details, because there's a lot of stuff that people are going to say, I don't remember. But they do. It's in there. And
gotcha.
yeah, and so you'll get bits and pieces, just like with Mr. Wayne. We got bits and pieces until there was a formation of it, and it wasn't till in the the trilogy of his life that he started to really get to understand his parents' death and everything else, and that's really what we do in therapy as well, is we fill in the blanks by getting them comfortable in order to be vulnerable, and then go back there and then come back and release.
True, true. In Bruce Wayne's case, there's there's a lot of gaps, especially when we first encounter him, because of how much he's running from, especially where his parents are concerned. And to just kind of jump into it, the first thing that that I focused on was what is the primary source of his. Actually, let me back it up a little bit more.
Yeah.
This is going to be if you've watched any of or if you've listened to any of our episodes in the past, this is going to be some subtle foreshadowing. If there is so much trauma to
Oh
this
my god.
character, so much trauma.
Well, you know what? I'm just glad you said it first this time, because it's usually me. And everybody's probably getting sick of it. Like, this guy, his head is just full of trauma, but it's just the reality.
It's just a reality. But even by our show's standards, there's a lot to unpack here. I mean, this is Anakin territory, with how many different layers there are, and how many I guess you would call them core memories to steal from inside out. Core traumatic memories that have been imprinted upon his psyche, which have shaped him and his identity and his personality. So I want to start with what I took away to be the primary trauma, which was his parents' murders. Not the first trauma, though, but the primary one. First one being when he's attacked by the bats, when he falls down the well and breaks his arm and they attacked him. That gives him PTSD symptoms later when they're at the opera, which I still wonder to this day why they thought it would be a good idea to go to an opera that had this kind of horrific theme literally a few days after he goes through this dramatic experience. But nobody's perfect. So he has that severe PTSD reaction. He starts having flashbacks in the theater. So his parents are being compassionate people. They leave with him to get him outdoors for some fresh air. and then they're mugged and shot by a robber, and Bruce is left with that and their bodies, and it's that horrible, horrible trauma and guilt, which almost immediately starts to set in afterwards. During the funeral, there's that tender but also brutal scene with him and Alfred where he confesses to Alfred that he feels he's responsible, that it's his fault, because if he just hadn't gotten scared, then they wouldn't have had to leave, and then they wouldn't have been murdered.
Well, I mean, like we both know, having worked in the field for a while, is this idea that children internalize everything. So no matter what it might be, if a parent, and I guess I can talk about some horrible stuff, but well, I won't go too far into it. But this idea that if a parent beats their children, or an uncle or some puts out a cigarette on somebody's back, just horrible stuff that happens in this world. For some reason, and the only reason I'm pushing the a slight bit of extremes to solidify my point, the child will internalize that. The child will think, I must have done something to provoke it. I must not be doing good enough in school. I must not be a good enough kid. I shouldn't have X, Y, and Z. And they might verbalize, that I hate my blah blah blah, and I can't. They're so mean to me, or whatever it is. But internally, their processing is thinking that there's something wrong with them. And it changes this in particular, what you're talking about now with the parents, which I agree with you, was the catalyst for full blown PTSD. Which again, we're way ahead of ourselves already naming that, but it did start with the bats, because he lost control. He was trapped. He wasn't able to get out, and now once again he's trapped and he's not able to get out. He's not able to fix or solve any of the problems, the solutions. And then there's also survivor's guilt and everything else that's mixed in within his age. But this is just going to change his whole worldview. Now the world is a dark place, where his dad was trying to bring light, and I would argue that he did a pretty dang good job.
Oh yeah, his dad's a wonderful person,
just a stand-up guy, and his mom as well. But this is the starting point to where he starts to transform his pain into a mission. I don't think he understood what the mission was, not until he got older, and we see that.
And the mission objective itself changed multiple times, even before he ever got the idea for Batman. When we reconnect with him in his 20s, when he comes back to Gotham for the first time since leaving as a child, there's that he reveals to us, but not to his loved ones, that he's planning to kill the murderer of his parents, who's getting released onto parole in exchange for testifying about one of the Gotham mob bosses.
Yeah.
Well, it's Carmine Falcone in this version.
Falcone. I'm sorry. Yeah.
But yeah, already his guilt has transformed into anger. It's been masked by anger, probably as a shield to protect himself from that awful, from the pain, but also from the blame that was everything as a kid, and that becomes his mission. To take vengeance upon the person who did all this to me. But then that's thwarted when someone else beats him to it.
Yeah. Well, they needed to tie off all loose ends, but for me, it's such an interesting thing to see the patterns play out, right? And avoidant behavior is part of the diagnosis that I'm going to pretend like I'm not already giving, but it's this. He feels stability, he feels strength, he feels grounded through anger, right? Even there's a statement where he's saying, I wrote this down, I'm not afraid, I'm angry. And that's almost like the narrative for his life up until a certain point. And with that, it's now his identity is shaped around this, these moments of trauma, or the moment. I'd say these. And then everything becomes more reaction, right? More reaction to the loss. In order to counteract the emotional pain that he's avoiding. He'd rather sit in suffering. And we talked about pain versus suffering, and he's and this poor kid has been suffering for decades now, and we see it come to a head.
Right. Even Ra's al Ghul. Speaking of ghouls,
Ah,
his see what I did there. His
yeah, I did.
his mentor and eventual enemy points out to him that you quote you have learned to bury your guilt with anger. That I will teach you to confront it and to face the truth. Now, ultimately, Ra's al Ghul's truth turns out to not be a great one either, and certainly not the answer for Bruce's trauma.
Yes, absolutely. I'm glad you pointed that out, man. And that's a big one for you listeners, man, because I'm not going to say that, but there are a few books out there that really try to hone in on this mentality of that vulnerability is weakness, that you need to be strong and you need to not give a crap about everything and or anything, but there needs to be a counterbalance.
A mentor of mine and of yours too. Maybe I don't know if he ever said this to you once, summed it up with the phrase "Don't get mad, get even," as an example of that unhealthy mentality. That vulnerability is a sign of failure and weakness, and that only unwavering strength and control over the adversity is the answer, which isn't.
No, not at all.
It couldn't be farther from the truth. And in Bruce's case, it's really interesting because it's kind of lucky, really, that he had something else happen to him before meeting up with Ra's al Ghul, who tried to teach him this. That ultimately was what helped him realize another truth, and really a deeper truth that would ultimately lead to the birth of Batman, which is compassion. After he failed to get his vengeance, he was then confronted by really a reality check on a couple levels. He was confronted by a reality check that his vengeance ultimately is that's so personal to him is kind of insignificant in the grand scheme of the chessboard that is Gotham City, with power players like Carmine Falcone being able to order executions and take away what he wants. And then his childhood friend and now assistant DA Rachel Dawes hits him with another reality check that says, look, Falcone isn't the one who killed your parents, but he's doing way worse than the guy who killed your parents ever did. And you're not even, and it's selfish of you to want to be pursuing this personal quest for vengeance when all this other pain and all this other strife is going on, and all this corruption and rot that your parents tried to fight for. And you could be, in her own way, she may have been trying to say that, a much better way to honor your parents is not to get vengeance on them, but to continue their work, and what they stood for. And then finally, the third reality check is when Bruce, in what you were saying earlier, I'm not afraid, I'm angry. He kind of takes that mentality to confront Falcone face to face in his own private restaurant. And Falcone doesn't even, bat an eyelash. He taunts Bruce, shuts him down, and then has him tossed out on his butt.
Yeah, he doesn't care.
Yeah. So Bruce learns ultimately that wanting vengeance and nurturing that desire for vengeance didn't get him anywhere, and that even though the guy who killed his parents is dead, nothing was really solved. No, he didn't feel better, and the problems that led to his parents being killed by that man in the first place aren't going anywhere either. So he has that now, that lesson. It's been internalized, or at least partially absorbed by the time he meets Ra's al Ghul, and that's when he completes his training with Ra's al Ghul and is about to join the League of Shadows. He has that epiphany about compassion, which is that ultimately, to fight against injustice and criminality, you have to recognize what it is that separates you from them in the first place: compassion, which Ra's al Ghul never grasps.
No, and I mean but that's the whole thing, is that with that mentality, you'll never feel pain again, or you'll never feel, I guess, pain again. But we want to feel pain. We don't want to suffer, and that's the direction he was trying to point him in his own positive way. He was trying to, well, in his own way, I guess, he was trying to make a difference in the world, just like Thanos, I guess, right? When I'm stuck in traffic, sometimes I get it, but it's not the right way. But
With a single snap of my fingers, I could clear the LA freeway.
right, 50% gone, man. But you just don't know who the 50% are going to be.
We've all thought about it.
but then I want to go back even a little bit further. When he's in the jails, when he's giving up all his belongings, his wealth, and he comes to this, in my opinion, or my perspective, he comes to this point of his life that he's just emotionally detached, right? He needs to not feel that his goal or his quest is unattainable. So now he doesn't know what to do with himself. So he punishes himself, which is a real major characteristic of trauma. It's very avoidant. He's going into jail. He's fighting. He's trying to survive. But it's all based around him not wanting to be present, not wanting to deal with everything that has happened to him. And then he gets thrown a lifeline, but the lifeline is actually hidden in a way to say, here, this is how you're going to feel better. This is how we're going to be able to get revenge on everybody that's done wrong, all the bad people. And he goes with it because at this point he's so detached from himself to be able to see. He's a really smart man, but he's so emotionally hurt, and we see the little boy in him, the child in him, cling on to that because it's hope, or he feels very hopeless. He feels, I would even argue, both hopeless and helpless. And then we catch up to where you are now, where we find the man reemerge. We find his compassion, we find his empathy, where he doesn't want to kill the other guy. He doesn't want to kill the guy to fulfill his final test. So instead, he tries to save him. He tries to do everything that he's always wanted to do, and be the man he's always wanted to be. But it still takes some time to figure it all out.
It's ironic, thinking about it, that it took going through the brutal training and the philosophies of power control that the League of Shadows propagated in order for him to get to a place where he was then capable again of becoming, as you said, the man he was always meant to be, and having that epiphany about compassion.
Right. But now, right before he's supposed to do the final, I don't know, deed in order to fulfill his obligation to the squad, or however you want to look at it, that's when he finds a way. And they didn't really highlight it there, but this is, and it could be me digging a little bit too deep, but it almost felt like he found a way to disassociate. Right, I can be the Bat, or I can be Bruce, and oh, you do agree? Okay, he's shaking his head like crazy. He finds a way in order to not feel the pain. But again, he continues to suffer, man. He's not being, his authentic self. He's not being Bruce Wayne. He's being a version of him in order to isolate and avoid everything that he's gone through and everything he goes through. But in a weird way, they gave him an opportunity to find another shortcut. Right? It started off with in the alleyway, or I guess the subway area, or underneath the bridges, or whatever the heck he was. And then it went into the jails, and then it went into the training, and so on and so forth. And we'll find him in a ditch, or a deep dark hole at some point too. I think what we're talking about. Mind you, literally my favorite villain of all time. I love Bane.
He is amazing.
Amazing. I don't like. It's hard for me to say I don't like him, because I do. He protects children. He cares. He just goes about it in the wrong way. I know, dude. I keep defending these bad
You
guys
old
every time.
softy.
I know. I even liked Vito. I mean, and yeah, he was not great either. But yeah. Anyways, so we can see his transitions and how he continues to separate and isolate listeners. And I'm not saying that he needs to or abandon the mask and just be himself. That's not what I'm talking about. But what he does need to do is be himself even with the mask on. That's the difference, and we see that towards the end.
And we do, but I'm so excited and glad that you brought this up, because yeah, if you take a look at that aspect of his avoidance and his disassociation during that period you were just describing up to the League of Shadows, you can really start to get a grasp on his thinking, on his frame of mind that led to him after the League of Shadows coming up with his concept of the Batman. What he says to Alfred when he's revealing to him after returning from the League of Shadows and he's going back to Gotham after 7 years is that Batman is a symbol. He's going to become a symbol to stand against corruption and injustice and fight criminals and save Gotham. And the reason he gives Alfred for becoming the Batman and for the need of Batman as a symbol is that it helps to, one, make him incorruptible and invulnerable to, to the trappings of mortality. In other words, in his words, actually, I think he phrased it best. As a man, I'm flesh and blood. I can be destroyed, but as a symbol, I can be everlasting. So there's that. And then Alfred points out, too, that the symbol can act as a persona to protect the people he cares about from reprisals and vengeance.
It's going to come back on them
because it's going to come back on the people he loves if he takes on the mob. But there's another side to this too that he doesn't admit, but which, if you take into account what you were just talking about with the avoidance and with, ironically, what the League of Shadows gave him and taught him, even though he didn't agree with it on a fundamental level, is that Batman is also offering him a way to give him power and control over his fears and trauma by merging and embracing them, but not accepting them, if that makes sense. It
makes total sense to me.
It's not quite the same as that full self-actualization that we therapists get so gooey inside about. But,
right.
And that's the real irony of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it gives him an opportunity to dip his toes in the water, is how I look at it. He's vulnerable to a certain extent, but he takes on this persona, which is all him. He is Batman. He is Bruce Wayne. He is the Playboy. He is all of these things are all pieces of him, but he's fragmented them into different arenas and different time slots in order to protect himself. Because if he's the Playboy, nobody expects anything from him. He can make mistakes. He can be arrogant. He can say what he wants, whatever. He plays it off to the general public, like, oh, I'm being this way to in order to distract or get people to not look at me or understand that it's not me. He does the Batman in order to showcase his anger, his frustration with the world around him, and everything else. And the Bruce Wayne that I forgot her name, that the DA knows, that's the softer side. That's the vulnerable part.
Yeah, Rachel Dawes.
I'm bad with names. I'm
That's horrible. Good. That's why I'm here.
Yeah, there you go. A balance. And so they're all him, though. And what he comes to understand is that once he can unite on all fronts, he's so much more powerful. Because now his vulnerability is his power, and his calmness and his stillness and his understanding are limitless. And that's what the Batman will give him. That's what Bruce will give him. That's what everything and everything. It all comes together, and that's the person that we got the privilege of sitting down with, and helping him kind of sort through it all.
The evolution of the meaning behind Batman as a symbol also changes multiple times over the course of the trilogy, even after even after he returns to Gotham and starts to make a difference, in the ways that you were just describing, as both his facade as Bruce Wayne and the inroads that he makes as Batman.
Quoting off your quote, he said something like, Batman has no limits. And then, Alfred said, but either Bruce does or you do, sir, or something to that effect. And if you know Alfred's backstory, which I'm sure you do, he knows what he's talking about.
Alfred's been places.
Yes, and he's always he learned, I think, a long time ago that you have to be you, man. You have to be you in order to balance out, and you could still be as effective as Batman is, or as Alfred was when he was, working in the shadows as a young man.
I was gonna, yeah, exactly, and I was gonna say too. It ties back into what we talked about, both with our episodes on Darth Vader and with Boba Fett, which is where does the mask end and the person underneath begin? And Rachel, to her credit, points out probably before anyone else, with the exception of Alfred, but Alfred uh, doesn't doesn't actually say it to Bruce until later, even if he's realized it by that point, that it's really Bruce Wayne who is the mask, and Batman, his literal mask, is his true face because of how much he has invested now in this symbol and the lengths he's gone to create and demonstrate this persona for his cause of justice and protecting Gotham. Bruce's reaction to that at the time is stoic. He doesn't reject her, but it's also it's not a happy truth, even though he knows on a deep level she's absolutely right.
Well, if he takes that in, he's going to let in a little glimpse or an emotional connection to all the, the emotional chaos that he's been going through for decades. So he can't let that in. He can't even acknowledge it. He needs to sit with it, and I'll give him credit that he sat with it, because I've worked with a million people that won't even sit with that. They'll shoot it down. They'll run away from it. They'll get angry with you. They'll change the subject. They'll do whatever they need to do to avoid that, because it gets them too much closer to what they're actually avoiding, which is themselves and all the emotional pain that they don't want to deal with.
And speaking of chaos, when
Uh-oh.
when the Joker enters the scene, oh my God, a lot happens and a lot shifts. The Joker killings, because that's what they are throughout the course of the Dark Knight. It was really, I had never properly focused on this, which is weird, but I guess it just hit me harder this time when I was taking an extra hard look at the events for our session with him. The Joker really kills a lot of people, and brutally. It's a total bloodbath in Gotham.
Oh, we haven't even. I mean, we're not going to get into it today, but that gentleman has some demons. There's a lot of stuff there, and unfortunately takes advantage of people that have a lot of emotional and mental issues, to do his bidding, because he gets to a point to where he feels that that's the only way he's ever going to find peace, is by having full control, which is going to contrast with our friend, because he's doing the same thing, and they're going through the same process at the same time in just a different way.
Right. Completely different approaches to fundamentally the same problem.
Exactly.
The Joker kind of even touches upon that at the end when he remarks to Batman, "This must be what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object."
That's awesome, actually. Well, I think that there's something to that, and I think there also is something to them both, almost kind of understanding each other. And you see it. You see the frustration. You see everything else. But I think they did a good job at highlighting how they're on the same trajectory, just from a different angle. One is chaos. So they, well, in his mind, it's controlled chaos. He's controlling it anyway. He feels that he is. And the other is to extinguish all chaos, to find peace through brute force. So they're doing the same damn thing. So that's such a connection that they have from a different angle. And I wonder, he didn't speak much about it, but I wonder if how that affected the way they interacted with each other. I wonder if it brought in, because I've seen this with sibling sets. I've seen it with parents and children, or friends, or husband and wife even. It either brings them, causes friction, to where we have an explosion, because there can only be one, the Highlander a little bit, or it creates a mutual understanding, not a liking, but an understanding, to where it creates a little bit of connection, and maybe even empathy in a weird way.
I'm going to borrow a quote from another serial killer story, Silence of the Lambs. Not the movie, by the way. This is a line you're only going to find in the novel, listener. So if you know the movie but haven't read the book it's based on, highly recommend it. The quote goes, "It is difficult to accept that someone can understand you while not wishing you well."
That's perfect. That is perfect. Can we sit down with him someday?
Oh yeah, he's totally.
Oh, I would love that. Oh, I would love that. Okay, yeah. No,
his
that
time's
encompasses
coming.
everything what you're talking about, or what we're talking about. That's
Yeah.
perfect.
The Joker acts, in his words, as an agent of chaos, and he claims his desire is to be all about upsetting the order and showing everybody everybody who tries to be organized and peaceful the futility of their facade. And Batman attempts to
Intense discipline.
Intense discipline.
Yeah.
Intense discipline, preserve discipline and order at all costs, even using, shall we say, chaotic methods to do so.
And rarely showing vulnerability, man. Like rarely. He needs to be as stoic as possible. The emotional pain he puts into his planning, his training, rescuing other people. It's all there. It's all externalized, but it's never internalized, and that's how he's protected himself for so long.
Right. And to piggyback off of that too, I was talking earlier, right, about the evolving meaning of behind the symbol of Batman. I think that by the time of the Dark Knight, it had taken on not an extra, but a new layer, a new meaning to that, because it was more externalized. At this point, he'd been active in Gotham for some time. He'd actually had an impact. A lot of criminals had been taken off the streets. The Gotham PD and the courts were cracking down harder, and you had this new upcoming, very promising attorney named Harvey Dent who was making waves. We'll get to him in a moment. Really, what had happened now was that the symbol of Batman had become somewhat politicized. It was no longer just a symbol of personal meaning for Bruce. Now it also meant collectively, criminals beware. Batman is making Gotham a better place, and so that I think added to the pressure that Bruce felt to maintain that appearance of absolute no vulnerability, incorruptibility.
I love that we're going in the same direction at the same time, and I saw it from a different angle. I agree. I completely and utterly agree. I also think that Gotham, in a way, turned into his parents, man. I think his self-sacrifice, him even sacrifice against his own well-being for Gotham. But Gotham was not just Gotham. Gotham is his parents. Gotham is his mom, is his dad, and in his dad's all the power and energy that he put into building the train system and doing all these things, all the good that he could, was all associated with, now that they're past, he needed to protect and conserve that memory, those people, and that's the symbolism, or that's the martyr complex, I guess we can say, that I saw.
I really like that. This isn't the case with every version of the character. as far as his parents' stories are concerned. But in this trilogy, absolutely, they were kind of doing they were doing their own version of Batman's mission. And then after they're gone, it's true. It really is him trying in his own way and through his own methods, and despite his ongoing trauma, to carry on their work and finish the job they started. And that's brilliant. Sort of that they're the memory of them becomes inexorably conjoined with the city of Gotham in a symbolic sense.
It's beautiful. Shows me who he is. Shows me the deep connection, the his ability for empathy, his ability for relationships, his loyalty, everything that's there. But it also shows me the other side of it, and exactly what we've been talking about, how he's so disconnected from self. He's isolating his affect. He's intellectualizing everything in order to not have to feel the emotional connection to it, or doing it because it's the right thing. No, it's doing it because it's systematic and it needs to happen in this way. He turns down any tenderness in order to really sit in a place of stoicism.
And that really gets put to the test at the end of the second piece of the trilogy, when the Joker kills Rachel and defaces, literally, Harvey Dent, and causes him to succumb to his own inner darkness and start killing people for his own trauma. What ultimately, without recapping the entire movie on the session, as much as I would love to do that, what ultimately happens at the end of the Dark Knight is something I've always thought was truly extraordinary, for both what it shows us that Bruce did, but also the kind of commentary it makes about the possible role of the superhero. What is it really that a superhero is meant to do? So stick with me. This is going to be a bit of a deep dive, but
no, go for it. I love the deep dives.
Awesome.
That's where we got to live.
So ultimately, all of his efforts to stop the Joker are successful, in that the Joker is finally captured and locked up, and throw away the key. And yet Rachel's gone, his dearest childhood friend, who Bruce at this point is still harboring under the impression was going to stay with him, or was going to wait for him until finally he could hang up the cape and live a normal life again, and then they would be together. Although
I love that you said "hang up the cape."
It's a fun little phrase, and he was, a part of him, the part of him that still had some emotion and feeling, was really banking on that. It's kind of similar to what you see, I think, with a lot of military servicemen who go off to serve in wars, and they'll hold on to this hope. What'll keep them going is that I'll be able to come back to my wife or girlfriend who said she's waiting for me at the end of all of this.
Yeah,
it
exactly.
becomes
it's a great comparison for sure.
It really becomes the sort of the last light in the darkness. But what happens then when that light is snuffed out? That's what happens to Rachel. And on top of that, before she dies, Rachel writes a letter to Bruce that she leaves with Alfred, saying that actually she wants to marry Harvey Dent because they've been dating for a while, and he's actually the one that she wants to be with, and that she can't see, even though she loves Bruce and wishes she could be there more for him, she doesn't believe that he is ever going to be able to let go of Batman and let go of this crusade that he's on for his parents in the city. More on that in just a second, but this is part of the setup. After Rachel dies, Harvey turns to his inner dark side and becomes Two-Face with the Joker's prodding, and goes on a murder spree of his own and kills a bunch of people, including some cops. By the end of all of this, when the Joker's been locked up, Bruce Batman is confronted with a conundrum about Harvey. He stops Harvey, who's killed two now in the process. So his former friend and ally, now turned murderer, and who was previously this symbol of hope for Gotham, to stand against corruption and criminals, who was in
Well, he
many
was going to take the baton.
yeah, he was going to take the baton. In many respects, he saw Harvey as being the successor, the spiritual successor to Batman, because he could do all the things that legally and publicly and politically correct that Batman couldn't do. That Batman had to skirt the law in order to make happen. So Bruce was really counting on that, as well as Rachel, and now both are gone. And the question remains, what do we do? Do we, I mean, what's Gotham gonna make of this when they realize that not only is Harvey dead, but actually he killed a bunch of people, including some law enforcement officers, before he died? I think this ties into what you were saying earlier about how deeply this actually makes even more sense now that I say it. When you look at it from the perspective of Gotham and Bruce's parents are one and the same in his mindset at this point. How do I protect Gotham, my parents, from themselves with this? Bruce decides that Batman, not Bruce, but Batman will take the fall for Harvey's crimes.
Right. Again, selfless, or not selfless, but self-defeating.
Self-defeating. And there's the thing. It's an extraordinary sacrifice. I don't want to belittle or stamp on what he's doing here. It's an act of nobility that is just unprecedented. And that's what I was getting at earlier when I was talking about how it really makes you think about the role of the superhero. Is it the superhero's role is it the job of the superhero to only save people and help out when they can take the credit for it and be seen as the good guy for doing it? In this case, in order to be the quote unquote good guy, it means dragging Batman's name through the mud and becoming public enemy number one.
Right, but I wonder if that almost cages him in. And again, I'm not trying to minimize it at all. I think it's pretty brave, man. What he's doing and what he's hoping to do. But I wonder if subconsciously he's not picking up on the part to where he almost feels, without fighting crime, he who is he? He's avoiding meaninglessness. Yeah, that's a word. He's avoiding being able to move on, right? Being able to live this quote unquote normal life. Yeah, and Alfred calls him on it. He tells him he can't do it. You can't until he's forced, right? Or you see only one end to your journey, which is death. Because I think that part of him feels then his life wouldn't have been a waste. Again, the survivor's guilt. Again, it's this feeling of complete disconnection and so much pain that he's avoided for so long, that he needs to go out swinging. He needs to go out with his very last breath, so that he can do justice to his parents that were gone. That's what I picked. Again, maybe I'm digging too deep.
No, you're not. It's again like what you said earlier. We're exactly on the same trajectory here. I love it. We're beat for beat. What you just said, I want to add a couple more points that go before that, but after what I said, if that makes sense.
Okay.
That I think
go for it.
I think helped to that also contributed to leading up to that point where he was so far gone that Alfred had to hit him with that slap, that you only see one, as you said, one end to this. The thing about, as extraordinary as the sacrifice that he does is, the cost is just as great. I have in my notes, I love that you put, I forget the wording you just used, but I said in my notes, he becomes quietly resigned to the role out of both devotion to protect Gotham and on a personal level because of the trauma and, again, guilt, though this time guilt over the deaths of Rachel and Harvey Dent.
Well, it's just it's just more people to show that why am I still alive? How am I going to make my life worthy of this, I don't know, privilege? Which is still him avoiding the pain, man.
The sad irony is that although Alfred eventually calls him on this, prior to that, he tries to console him, because when he reads the letter that I mentioned earlier that Rachel left him, he doesn't give it to Bruce. He burns it because he just can't bring himself to hit Bruce with this truth, that, because even then the memory of Rachel's love is still, he can tell, something that's preventing Bruce from deteriorating completely.
Well, I think it would have I think Alfred knew that it would have pushed him too far to the other side, too far to where he wouldn't come back and he would become this person forever. I think Alfred always knew that he needed to find the balance. If he doesn't find the balance, he's never going to be where he needs to be. And Alfred's, like we said earlier, I'm not going to get into Alfred's backstory. Please Google it, because it's crazy.
Yeah, second that.
Yeah, it's if you don't have the balance, you'll never be able to feel balanced in life, and you'll never be as successful as you can be. He's willing to die for anybody or everybody, but he's not willing to live for himself, man. And that's such a big takeaway, based on his own trauma.
Right. And I agree. It was kind of an impossible choice, really, because if Alfred had given him the letter, as you say, it would have just pushed him too far.
It would have solidified the Batman.
Right.
He would have been one-sided as he kind of wants to be.
As he kind of wants to be. But on the other hand, by burning the letter and denying Bruce his own truth about, painful as it was, about how Rachel felt about him, that inadvertently causes him to just hold on harder to the grief from Rachel's death. And just as his own truth is denied that way, he denies the other greater truth about Harvey Dent for the people of Gotham. So you have a macro and a micro parallel right there.
That's kind of cool if you really break it down. But I mean, is it the chicken or the egg, right? Which would have been worse? And I guess we'll never know. I think there could be an argument for either side. Ultimately, it was all based on love. Alfred loves him very much, like a son, and it was based on wanting to do the best for him that he possibly can do, and that's the choice that he made, and that's okay. That might be a little bit more of his espionage than we give him credit for. Got to get rid of the evidence in order to protect for the greater good.
Right, the greater good. But,
the greater good.
And it's, well, I mean, that's what I completely agree, and that's what I was getting at. With when I say it's an impossible choice, I think it's as a therapist, if I would say to Bruce, in talking about this particular instance, that this is life, that sometimes life is going to put us in these situations where there's no easy choice between what's going to make me feel better and what's going to make me feel worse. Sometimes it's not about picking an obvious option, because no matter where you go, there's going to be pain, there's going to be hardship, but the context and the reasons behind why Alfred did what he did are everything. Understanding that he was, like you said, coming from a place of love by denying you that truth can mean something if you want it to, and I think that's what he would have wanted.
Given Bruce's moral rigidity, I think he would understand. I mean, look at his strict lines, right? You don't kill anybody, but then he has that inner conflict that's just killing him. It's destroying him. So I think he would understand. Probably wouldn't be happy about it, but I think he would understand.
And Alfred eventually does come around, getting back to what you were saying, and has that wonderful line in the final part of the trilogy that is directly in counter to the equally wonderful line that Bruce Batman has at the end of the Dark Knight. So the two quotes are beautiful because they're both two sides of the same coin, or maybe more yin yang, but I don't know. You let the viewers figure this out for themselves. Bruce's rationalization for taking the fall, or having Batman take the fall for Harvey Dent's crimes, and going into that deep disconnect for the sake of Gotham, is that sometimes the truth isn't good enough. Sometimes people deserve more. Sometimes people deserve to have their faith rewarded. And I want to emphasize, too, that I think he wasn't just speaking in terms of the context of himself, though that's certainly true, too. But he was talking about how much the people of Gotham had been through over the last several months from the Joker killings, which we were, talking about earlier. The city was really hurting, and they'd been, pushed and wounded and stretched to their very limit. And he really wanted to give them a reprieve, and hopefully at least some sense that all was not lost, that everything that they suffered under the Joker's chaos was not in vain. And not to say everything all over again, but that's, that was what caused it. But Alfred then gives the counterpoint to that when he's trying to get through to Bruce, who at this point is just so far gone and lost in his own desperation to basically just go down swinging, as you said earlier. And his quote is, "Maybe it's all time we stopped trying to outsmart the truth and let it have its day."
There you go. And that's the Alfred that I love, man. That's the balance that I've been looking for Bruce. And I wonder if there's also the other side to it, where he's giving his family, his siblings, his Gotham and his mother and his father, the justice that he never got. He's given them a symbol, something concrete, something for them to bite into, to sink their teeth into. That's the bad guy. He did that. And that's something that he always wanted. He went after the first guy that wasn't the guy. And he went after the second guy that kind of is the guy but wasn't the guy. And it's all it's all interconnected. But ultimately, he never got the symbol. He never got the person that he wanted. And eventually, he didn't need it, which is beautiful. That's what we ultimately want. But I wonder if this was his way of also giving back.
Bruce is at his deepest a very compassionate and caring individual.
Really is.
We learn that about him even as a child. After he falls into the well, breaks his arm, and is attacked by the bats, he still has the wherewithal and intent to give the arrowhead back to Rachel, that he stole from her when they were playing. So even when he's at his is hurting, he's still always thinking about the well-being of other people on some level. So yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, which he gets from his parents, because they were thinking about everybody else too. They were always trying to help the little guy, and I'm glad that he was able to internalize that part and run away with that part. So fascinating to think about how what he would have become if that never would have happened. But I guess it's all the shoulda, coulda, wouldas. We can't go there, but it's fascinating to think.
It is. I mean, even if we can't go there, it's it makes for some food for thought. I want to briefly. I know we still have a lot to cover with diagnosis and treatment, but I do want to get your thoughts on the final part of the trilogy, on Bane.
Okay,
and let's talk about that
again.
dark hole.
I love Bane. Love him. Amazing. Ask me questions. In what sense?
Yeah. So Bane sees right through Bruce. He says to him, here's my Bane impression: "You don't fear death. You welcome it. Your punishment must be more severe."
Yeah, that was actually pretty good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I appreciate it. In that sense, I saw that as becoming as the final piece of Bruce's trauma, that he finally encountered someone who, whereas with the Joker, it was more about their similar goals, different methods. Bane kind of strips him. I mean, literally, after he beats him, and breaks him and strips off his mask, strips him down to square one and confronts Bruce with his own darkest truth, which is that he never let go of that fear that was driving him all the way to where this began.
Exactly. And that's the best part. That was what he was needed. because he was the evolution of Bruce. The only bad part is that he went in the wrong direction, and he was, manipulated by the lure of true justice. And remember, with people that are trauma based, or any, being children of trauma, justice is again the highlighted word. And I know we've said it a million times now. It's neon light. It's New York City. It's blaring, and he found justice through, maybe not the best means, but it was for a cause, because he had seen how horrible humanity can be, especially, being born of darkness, as he says, which is amazing, man. Oh, I love that guy. And so he is able to see where he was with Bruce, and know where he needs to be, and how to, quote unquote, defeat him, what he didn't count on. And this is what I love. And if we want to take a metaphor of, a parent and a son, um, Bruce was now going to evolve as Bane did, but he's going to evolve past Bane. And that's what we want for our sons and daughters. That's what we want for our kids, is for them to be better than us. And I know it's a weird correlation, but I'm trying to emphasize that they were only a step behind each other.
Well, they really were. I mean, you said earlier, I love that you pointed this out, that Bane too is a protector in his own way. That he had a compassionate side where he was, dedicated to looking after a small child, and that
He almost got beat to death
got
for
beat.
it.
Yeah, and yet even then he never stopped looking out for that child, even after they grew up.
And he trained the same, just like Bruce. He knew the same people. I mean, it was just all. You could see how it was the evolution of him.
This is what I've said this word several times, but yet another crazy irony about all of this is that
Exactly.
just as the League of Shadows, took Bruce in when he was at his lowest, and unintentionally gave him the means to become first whole and then surpass them. Bane did exactly the same thing, and a double irony: he was working on behalf of the League of Shadows when he was
Uh
doing
huh.
so.
Yep. Exactly.
Uh,
Yeah.
and so that, this sort of leads me to what, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, on what I saw as the final stage of evolution for the meaning of Batman as a symbol. When he's in that prison, Bruce finally has to embrace the fear itself rather than the things that made him afraid. It's the difference, between, saying I'm going to become the Batman because bats frighten me, versus I am afraid. I'm Bruce Wayne and I'm afraid.
There you go.
I accept this fear.
Yeah.
And acknowledges that he fears losing those things that he still cares about: Alfred, his city, all of that. And that he's just Bruce, and Bruce feels the fear for those things.
That's it. And that's what I picked up on too. Exactly. And the way I worded it in my own head was that he finally came center, man. He finally came to his true authentic self, who he is. And he owned his pain. He owned it. And it sucked. It sucked. It sucks. I lost my parents. I lost the love of my life. I lost everything. And I continue to lose and lose and lose and lose. But I'm still alive. I'm still here. And there will be another day. I will be okay. And now that I'm aware of that, well, how can I use it as a tool? How can I use it as a power source? Because the other side of every trauma is knowledge. It's power. It just depends on our perspective. And I know a lot of people hate hearing that, but it's just our reality. We can either sit in the suffering of whatever happened to us and never evolve from it, or we can use it. And I've worked with terminal cancer patients. I've worked with different people that have gone through some severe, incredible trauma, and what I found is even in the darkest depths of that, when they can find the just the a water drop of the sunshine, of the life, of the ability to I woke up today. I have another chance today. It changes everything, everything. And all of a sudden, energy comes back. All of a sudden, the air feels a little clearer. All of a sudden, the sun feels amazing, and it's those moments, and he had those moments in his own way, right? We didn't get to hear or see all of it, but it was there, and that's the most beautiful part of it.
Yeah, I 100%, 110% agree with that. Without it, he could never have climbed out of that prison and gone back to the light. And to your point, talk about turning trauma, his trauma, into a tool or a power source. What does he do when he gets back to Gotham finally? He changes the nature of the symbol by having the return, announcing his return, the return of the Batman, with a flaming bat symbol, not the shadow symbol in the sky, but a giant flaming bat. He sort of brings Batman literally into the light.
Yes, perfect symbolism. Yes, and that's it. It's him saying, "I don't need to hide. I don't need to hide from myself anymore."
Exactly.
I mean, he's externalizing and showing everybody else, but really, that meant to me he didn't have to hide from himself anymore,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that was the most beautiful part of it.
Exactly. It's so beautiful. It's this incredible evolutionary arc of the symbol from being born in fear and darkness to finally coming out into the light and being his light of self-actualization and a light of hope at the same time for everybody else in Gotham.
The hardest part about this evening, uh, diagnosis. I'm sorry, everybody. I
Y'all know this
really
was
am.
coming. We've alluded to it. It's complex PTSD.
It's complex PTSD. Yeah, nightmares, isolation, survivor's guilt, emotional numbing. I mean, on and on and on.
Flashbacks, avoidance,
Rumination.
rumination.
Oh my gosh, everything and anything. He did have some depressive features as well. Lack of pleasure, hopelessness, suicidal ideation through sacrifice, right?
Yeah, reckless,
Um,
impulsive behavior.
yeah. Obsessive traits, but I think that had to do with more of the trauma. But I can see somebody going with that: planning, order, perfectionism, stuff like that. Identity disturbances. Not really because he thinks he's a bat, but more of the idea that he's disconnecting from his true self, right? With who he is versus the Batman, and then fusing the roles
Right. He's living two lives,
as
and
the one.
he's living two lives, and he doesn't really have a clear sense of where one ends and the other begins.
There you go. And he doesn't want to find out until he does. And that's the joy of therapy. I'm glad you were there to help him, man.
Yeah, you too.
Chronic mourning, so I can see the grief.
Chronic mourning, and I would say maybe even chronic as well as complex PTSD
Ah,
too. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this. I was writing for an article that I in a series I've been doing for my one of my jobs uh, about trauma, and in it I offered my own take at one point on the difference between complex PTSD versus chronic PTSD. And the definition I gave was that complex trauma is what we would say when a person experiences multiple unresolved traumatic experiences in
yes.
succession.
Yeah, for a long period of time, but not. Yeah,
Right. For a long period of time, and the experiences themselves can be very different in nature. Like you survive a plane crash and then you get diagnosed with a terminal illness. Whereas chronic PTSD or CPSD, I saw that as being a recurring pattern of largely similar traumatic experiences that can be big or small in severity. But the key thing is that there is a repetition to their occurrence, almost to the point that it becomes part of your day-to-day existence, such as growing up in an abusive household.
that's what I was gonna say. That I think that the difference to me is that with chronic or persistent, we're looking over really long period of time, and almost like macro and micro traumas in succession, back to back to back to back to back to back, to where even if they start to climb out of the hole, they get pushed back in. To use his hole as a great metaphor for it.
Just thinking that.
Yeah, that's what I see it as. So that makes complete sense to me. What's the article?
I just called it Trauma 101. I'll see if I can find it for you. But it's
or post it up here so people can read it. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun writing it. It's just a breakdown of based on my own experience and research, kind of trying to sum up the general aspects of trauma in a layman's terms. But anyway, so with Bruce, yeah, you've got all of that and then some.
Oh, for sure. All right, so how you treating Mr. Wayne?
Yeah, I think for our friend Bruce, go right to it. A heavy trauma informed focus, and I
can see that.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this too. I think that with him, I would actually start the trauma work earlier than I would a lot of other patients. And here was my thinking behind this. Bruce is smart. He's capable. He is aware, I think, of the sources of his trauma, and he already understands how it affects him, and how is even, at least not all of it, not the deep fear and the self-actualization, but the trauma of just being Batman on a daily basis, the stress, the fear of fighting criminals, of putting his life on the line, of all of that. That's something that he already understands and can probably talk about. So using that as the jumping off point, I would start to do psychoeducation about trauma. I would start to talk about all the ways that that we just talked about, that the differences between chronic and PTS and complex PTSD, all of that, and then and use his hopefully use his already extraordinary intellect as a way to to get in on that. That said, I don't want to get bogged down in the technical details, because one of Bruce's best coping skills is being the schmoozing smart, billionaire CEO playboy. So if we take it too surface level or too intellectual, that I worry is going to cause the therapeutic relationship to feel superficial, and it could delay rapport
could
building.
Not agree with you more.
So I think it's a tightrope. It's a narrow balance to walk. But I think that it would be a good approach, because the trauma is still, 100% at the core of what he's bringing to us. So leading with that, and if we're able to get a little deeper, I would explore his compassion and his beliefs that are underneath the masks and the tactics and all that fighting. I'd ask him, in part, what allowed him to be so good as Batman. Let me rephrase that. I'd ask him, what allowed you to be so good as Batman was in part because Bruce Wayne really did care so deeply about the people of Gotham.
Okay,
and
I can see that.
And eventually, ask him to tell me about his parents. Tell me about what he does remember, the good as well as the bad. Do some grief work. How has he honored them in the past? Is there anything that he still feels has been left unsaid or undone that would help him to feel closure with their deaths? And ultimately, because now he really has hung up the cape and Batman is no longer needed. What are ways for him to still do that compassionate work and still help people in the ways that he learned from them, without having to sacrifice his own identity or his own health or safety in the process? So look at new ways to build connection with people. Look at new ways to be a compassionate individual for his community, his family, or even just Selena Kyle, if they're still hanging out together.
In whatever way he wants.
Finding. I think about this a lot, because I can't remember if this was in our Godfather episode or our Drago Bloodvist episode, but you had a great line where it was about just helping him find a way to redefine himself, and something along those lines.
that's kind of where my brain is too.
There's a lot of disconnect in addition to the trauma. There's a lot of identity disconnect to work through and untangle with, where even just because he's no longer Batman doesn't mean mentally that's all going to disappear overnight. So there's a lot to, I think, to explore and define and rediscover about his inner nature, right down to to the child inside him, to the boy who just who just loved and wanted to be loved by his parents and love everybody else.
That's going to be the tough part, but I agree, 110%. Yeah.
Yeah. How
No,
about you? Hit me with it.
Well, I mean, here's my thought process. Number one, uh, getting Bruce Wayne to even walk into a therapy session is going to be a pain in the butt. That's not going to be easy. He's not going to want to do that. But I think since he I guess faked his death, which means he's ready to live. In order to truly live, you need to heal, man. And I think he's already down the process. So I think there's a way to do it. But I think, like you said earlier, it has to be through conversation. It has to be through a partnership. It has to be me not coming in from any angle that feels like a source of power, as if I'm above him in any way, or that I'm trying to lecture him, or I'm trying to it just needs to feel like a conversation, and we need to really start to challenge some of his narratives, right? So again, I agree, trauma focused at first. We really need to get into that. I would start I honestly, I would start asking him more about what happened with his parents. I would start from the beginning, and that way it'll gauge how willing he is to open up. It's gonna also give me if he's gonna be kind of a jerk about it, if he's gonna get angry with me, if he's gonna push, if he's going to completely avoid, he's gonna try to charm his way out of it. He's gonna, I don't know, but I feel like if I go for the jugular right away, it'll rattle the cage, or shake the tree, because I want some apples to fall out, whatever they are, whether they're rotten or not. I don't really care. I want to challenge him because I think he's super smart. He's also very powerful, very strong emotionally, intellectually, and physically. So I want to rattle him a little bit, and I want him to be caught off guard. I want him to catch himself wanting to get mad at me, wanting to get frustrated, so that we can really then dive into it, and I can pull back, and I've done this long enough to know when to push and when to let off the gas, and meet in the middle, and then give him agency, right, over his narrative. Let him know that through the conversation and through everything else, that he's not just a protector, right? He's somebody that's gone through a lot of stuff, and that's okay. That he gets to live a full life. That it's all right. But that's going to come in time, right? And then we're going to go through a lot of grief stuff, existential stuff. Rachel's death, his parents' death, that's correlated. It's kind of like a waterfall towards the beginning. Grief in life, that he's never actually lived a life, and it's always been something for himself, or from the symbolism of his parents, what the city really means to him.
Yeah, that's a great
So
point.
it's kind of exploring that, of like, now it's you, man. What does that look like? How are you gonna exist out there? What are you doing? You're gonna get bored. There's only so, I try to read a lot. There's only so many books and only so much TV I can watch, where or I guess I can go on hikes and different things, but eventually he's gonna get bored. So what does living really look like?
That's why I mentioned earlier, like, possibly exploring ways he can still be compassionate and help people, because I think I agree with you. He's gonna still need to have feel that there's meaning in his life and that he has a purpose, because that defined him for so long. So I really like that, helping him ask the question, what could be my new purpose now?
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know if I'd go direct with it. I think I would let him figure that out. Because I think there has to be I don't want him to feel like I am minimizing his capabilities. I don't want him to feel like I'm treating him like a child. That I'm trying to tell him, well, now you're not doing that anymore, so you have to do this, this, and this, and this. I would love to explore it and see what's he thinking. He's filthy rich. I mean, I guess he can travel the world for the rest of his life, but at some point you kind of run out of continents, right? And eventually you'll run out of cities, and then eventually you'll run out of restaurants and coffee shops, and then what? What does that really look like? And just to get the wheels turning, wherever they go, that's up to him. And I wonder if he understands that peace can be noble too, man. It doesn't always have to come from like a sacrifice. And I wonder how he sees that, because he's now experienced it in a weird way. It didn't end with peace, but there was peace afterwards, and I'm assuming that now he's settling in, right. And then I would work. So now we have trust, right? I rattled the tree. I got him to either get pissed off at me or open up at some point, and or give me something that he thinks is going to appease me, or he's going to tell me something that he thinks I'm going to want to hear. This is just patterns of what people do. And it'll give me some insight, and I'll be able to push back, or look around the corner and find the hidden gems that he doesn't want me to see. And then he'll get frustrated with me, or he'll, I've heard it before. Are you psychic? No, I'm not psychic. It's just patterns, right? And then I would start working on all his false selves, right? Because now he trusts me. Now we're connected. And I'd look at the playboy. I'd look at the vigilante. I'd look at the boyfriend. I would look at Batman, and I would try to integrate them all into one whole, because they all, like we talked about at the beginning of this, they're all him. Every single part of it is just another aspect of himself. But if he can separate them, then he doesn't have to be vulnerable. But when we are truly ourselves with all aspects of ourselves together, there's flaws. We make mistakes. We say something we didn't mean to say. We act a certain way. We're emotional when we shouldn't be emotional. We're human. And when we're children of trauma, we try to avoid any vulnerability. So we'd rather isolate these different people within ourselves, so that we can truly be in charge of it, and at least think that we can control it all, and will never be susceptible, versus being whole, being ourselves. And once we can connect all of these, then he'll see how he's able to really live this life at peace, because he can bring up Batman when he needs him. He can bring out Bruce when he needs him. He can be charismatic, or he can be tart, tart. I don't know. And we're trying to look for an authentic expression of self.
I think you're right that the way to make that happen is really to hopefully help him find a way to fully embrace his humanity, because that is the defining separation between where Bruce ends and Batman begins. Is that Batman is not meant to be human. Batman is meant to be larger than life. But there is so much beauty and strength to be found in the vulnerability of embracing our humanity. That, as you say, that's where, if we can open a dialogue and a channel to that, I think where the real healing will come into play.
I totally agree, and that's what I'm thinking. And then lastly, a little bit of body work, really, because remember, he's been in a suit most of his life. That
right,
he's been literally in a suit, and I want him to feel safe in his own body, whether it's vulnerable or not, because it is vulnerable. And I'm not even going to get into my frustration that he didn't use the technology to build himself an Iron Man suit, because I think he could have. He could afford it, I'll tell you that.
Oh yeah,
but, that's I'll leave that one alone, and try to help him foster some really intimate relationships. He has them; they're there, but he just doesn't let himself be vulnerable yet. And I think that's just going to take time, because everything he loves dies. Everything he connects to goes away. So we need to change his mindset on that, and get him to understand that that's not always the case.
Right. It's not the end all. That death is painful, but that it's not. It does not have to be the standard to which he carves in stone his outlook on the world.
I mean, in long term, really, we're getting him to choose life, not needing to mask to justify anything. Just to be him. Redefining his heroism, just like you were talking about. What does that look like?
And redefining his
forgiving
humanity.
himself.
Yes, actually, forgiveness. I'm glad you thought to mention that, because that slipped my mind completely. But that's so crucial. That's that self-forgiveness, to forgive himself.
Well, but that's going to come through understanding. See, and I think that's where some therapists make a mistake, is that they go to that first. But I think that needs to be an outcome, because they already know that. That's what they're avoiding. That's the little boy that they're hiding inside of themselves. And if you go straight for that, guess what? They've had 30 plus years of practice of hiding that and feeling that way, no matter what you tell them. But if we can go in through the back door, we can address and really hold all these other things up for him to see. Boom, there's the byproduct will be that he's going to forgive himself. And we don't even have to ever touch it. He'll do it himself. That's the beauty of it, man. That's the poker game that we're playing in the long run. So I mean, I just want him to be a man that can rest. He can't fix the world, and I want him to get that out of his head. And he doesn't need to live in suffering anymore. He can have purpose, and that's the beautiful thing. And this purpose doesn't need to be to save my parents again, because Gotham again is his parents. There was a quote that I wrote down somewhere. Hold on, sorry listeners. Oh, you either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become a villain.
Oh, such an iconic line.
I think there's something to that, right? And I think he has lived long enough now that he can see himself become a hero, but just from a different perspective.
Well, that I'll give my own quote, and then to close out is that he says to Gordon before he leaves Gotham, a hero can be anybody, even a man putting a coat around a kid's shoulders to let him know it's okay, that the world hadn't ended. That's the true lesson. That's the true, the true light and joy that he's known it all along, and he was able to impart it to Gordon, who imparted it to him, because just as Batman was the hero to the children of Gotham, Gordon was Batman's hero, was Bruce's hero.
Absolutely.
And so as we're so fond of saying, it's all connected.